After President Donald Trump spread misinformation about over-the-counter pain medicine and autism in a White House press conference on Monday, a New Mexico-based autism advocacy group and an Albuquerque doctor are worried that pregnant patients could ignore their pain or be burdened with, quote, mom guilt. A Doña County data center campus has been named one of 5 sites in the $500 billion Stargate project, a sweeping initiative led by Oracle, OpenAI, and other tech companies looking to build some of the nation's largest artificial intelligence infrastructure. Despite bipartisan calls for action, New Mexico's top Senate Democrat said Tuesday he remains opposed to including interstate medical compacts on the agenda for the upcoming special legislative session. Dozens of people gathered for a contentious meeting on Tuesday to consider what will be done with the 236-acre tract of land that houses the annual New Mexico State Fair. And a public meeting in Las Cruces this week focused on a proposed land swap between the New Mexico State Land Office and the Bureau of Land Management. From the Albuquerque Journal, this is the leading news. I'm Gino Gutierrez. It's Wednesday, September 24th, and I'll have more on those stories in a few moments, plus a look at Albuquerque's weather forecast on the other side of this break.
Kirtland Air Force Base isn't just an installation. It's the nation's hub for national security and space innovation. With 109 mission sets driving global defense across 52,000 acres, Kirtland is poised for incredible growth. The Kirtland Partnership Committee stands beside that mission every day, supporting our workforce, advancing innovation, and growing the next generation of leaders and scientists. Learn more about how we connect community and defense at kpcabq.org.
After President Donald Trump spread misinformation about over-the-counter pain medicine and autism in a White House press conference on Monday, a New Mexico-based autism advocacy group and an Albuquerque doctor are worried that pregnant patients could ignore their pain or be burdened with, quote, mom guilt. With more on this, I'm now joined by the Journal's federal government reporter Kathy Cook, who's been covering this story. Kathy, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me, Gino.
So Kathy, the White House obviously holding this press conference on Monday sharing this misinformation, but can you give our listeners a little bit more of an overview on exactly what was said?
Right. So President Trump was joined by the Health and Human Services Secretary, Robert Kennedy Jr., and they had teased, we're going to have a big announcement about the cause of autism. And so once he started speaking, he's made this claim that acetaminophen is associated with big increases in autism, acetaminophen use during pregnancy. There's not substantial scientific evidence to back his claim. There's no scientific evidence, it's a claim that's not proven. Right. That's caused concern for medical organizations, many of which have pushed back on that claim in that press conference. It's caused worry for autism advocacy groups, right? Because, it's best for medical information to be well substantiated by scientific research.
And Kathy, there's been a lot of pushback from the medical community since that press conference on Monday. Doctors and professional groups, including the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, are strongly rejecting this claim that the president made. But I want to focus on what some local groups here in New Mexico had to say about the president's announcement. What did they share with you?
Right. So I got a chance to speak with Christina Angel, who's the executive director for the Autism Society of New Mexico. And she said, this could have negative effects on the autism community because it could place a lot of guilt on mothers who maybe used acetaminophen, which is often sold under the brand name Tylenol during their pregnancy because it's considered safe to use during pregnancy. There's a recommendation on the bottle to consult with your doctor, right? That's already on the bottle. And so, she went as far as to say it's very dangerous for the autism community as a whole. And she is the parent of 2 autistic sons. And she said, when she heard this information, she is already a parent who's accepted her son's diagnoses. And she said it's been an honor raising them, but she could see this especially affecting parents who maybe just recently got an autism diagnosis and are struggling to figure out what's good information and what's bad information.
And Kathy, another key part of your story is the FDA's stance to this press conference that the president held on Monday. What exactly did they share with the public?
So the Food and Drug Administration took a slightly more measured tone than the president and his comments. So they sent a letter recommending that doctors consider minimizing using acetaminophen during pregnancy.
And Kathy, I want to backtrack to something you said a little bit earlier, and it's really interesting because acetaminophen is really one of the only few safe pain and fever treatments that women can use during pregnancy.
That's right. Yeah. So NSAID pain relievers, which would be like your ibuprofens, can cause birth defects if you're using them long term during pregnancy. You can maybe use them short term for like a few days, but if you're using them long term or chronically, they can cause issues. They can also, cause kidney issues or issues with amniotic fluid level. But acetaminophen can be safely used to treat fevers, and fevers can be a sign of infection during pregnancy. It's important to treat them. Pain can be an important symptom to pay attention to during pregnancy. So I had the chance to speak with an OBGYN who specializes in high-risk pregnancies, and she really pointed out that it's important for pregnant patients not to ignore their pain and not to try to quote-unquote tough it out, as the president said during his press conference, because symptoms like pain can be a symptom of a bigger issue during pregnancy, right? Like a serious headache during pregnancy could be a symptom of preeclampsia, which is a serious medical condition.
So we're seeing a lot of pushback across the nation and right here in New Mexico to President Donald Trump falsely claiming that acetaminophen used during pregnancy may increase autism risk. Albuquerque Journal federal government reporter Kathy Cook stopping by to share the latest with us. Thank you so much, Kathy.
Thank you, Gino.
A Doña County data center campus has been named one of 5 sites in the $500 billion Stargate project, a sweeping initiative led by Oracle, OpenAI, and other tech companies looking to build some of the nation's largest artificial intelligence infrastructure. With more on this development, I'm now joined by Journal reporters Hannah Garcia and Algernon DeMassa. Guys, thank you so much for being here. I want to start with what this major AI hub in New Mexico will be. What can you share with us on that front?
The data center that we've talked about, in Doña County has kind of been talked about for quite some time, just kind of, I think, under the guise of Project Jupiter, which is something that Algernon has done extensive coverage over, kind of following, the ins and outs of that and through commissioners and just things like that. But yeah, it's super exciting to hear that New Mexico was chosen as one of the many few select states to kind of help house and begin this Stargate project that was set forth by the White House in January.
And Algernon, as Hannah just mentioned, you've really done a lot of extensive reporting on this data center down in southern New Mexico, including reporting on record-breaking financing that is attached to it. What can you tell us about that?
So the county approved a $165 billion with a B industrial revenue bond. And it's important to note that this is not a general obligation bond. This is not the county borrowing money or committing any money or holding any responsibility for debt down the line. The way an industrial bond works is that the county holds the property that is developed at the site and they are leasing it back to the company. And $165 billion represents the maximum that the developers anticipate is going to be invested. It's a massive private capital investment in the county. And then this is for a project life anticipated to be 30 years. So that's the life of the bond. The process for this was narrowed to 3 weeks. And the public really learned about it for the first time when the county commission first discussed the ordinance in August. And that set off a process of the community trying to ask questions and offer input with a very narrow 3-week window in the process before the county commissioners voted 4-1 to approve this bond. And what they're essentially doing is they're foregoing property taxes on this development in exchange for some payments in lieu of taxes and some other investments that the developers have promised to make.
And guys, as with any project like this that comes to New Mexico, one of the biggest questions is what kind of economic impact it will have for the state. As far as that goes, what do we know so far?
Yeah, so the Doña County data center site is projected to bring 2,500 construction jobs, 1,500 jobs once it reaches completion and operation. The companies have also dedicated and committed, $50 million for local water systems in the county, as well as another $6.9 million for community projects. It's also of note that the data center will be powered by its own microgrid system, so it will not be connected to any local grid, therefore ensuring no locals will see any kind of electricity bill rises, as well as, having to be worried about supply and demand when it comes to electricity.
And Algernon, I want to backtrack a little bit to something you mentioned earlier, and that was the community response to this project, obviously only learning about it recently. What are some of the concerns that were brought up by community members?
Yeah, local opposition formed fairly quickly. A lot of this is over process, and a lot of it is over unanswered questions. The microgrid is going to be powered by natural gas for an undetermined amount of time, and natural gas turbine systems are water intensive. And so some in the community just really wanted some answers about how much water is going to be consumed in the construction and operation of the plant. And there were not a whole lot of answers to that. People wanted to know about power and the impacts. The developers had been negotiating with El Paso Electric about infrastructural needs for a couple of years. But when it came time in 3 weeks to have town halls to talk to the community, a lot of information was either protected as trade secrets or protected under non-disclosure agreements. And so there was a lot of frustration. It's as a community that has been burnt by industrial development in the past. And so that lack of transparency about some of the details, changing answers over the process of 3 weeks, really kind of turned some people against the project. And some people who were not opposed to the project were simply upset about the process. I should mention that County Commissioner Susana Chaparro, who was the only vote against the industrial revenue bond, voted against it not so much because she opposed the project or, building lots of jobs and tech jobs in the county. It was really just about the fact that she didn't feel she, let alone the community, really got all the answers that they needed, that the developers were hiding the ball a little bit, in her view.
So this data center in southern New Mexico, part of the Stargate project, Oracle will lease the center for 18 years with OpenAI being a primary client and reinforcing U.S. efforts to stay competitive with China and AI development. Albuquerque Journal reporters Hannah Garcia and Algernon Damasa stopping by to share the latest on this with us. Thank you so much, guys.
Ciao.
Absolutely. Thanks so much.
In other headlines from the newsroom, New Mexico's upcoming October 1st special legislative session is stirring debate over whether to include interstate medical licensure compacts, which would let doctors and specialists practice across state lines and help address the state's provider shortage. Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham strongly supports adding the compacts to the agenda, warning that failure to act could jeopardize access to federal rural health care funding worth up to $100 million a year. But Senate Majority Leader Peter Wirth and other top Democrats remain opposed, saying long-term licensing changes shouldn't be rushed to meet federal grant deadlines. The legislature has considered the compact since 2019, with bills repeatedly stalling in the Senate over concerns about legal sovereignty and patient safety. This comes even as most other states have adopted at least one. New Mexico currently participates only in the nursing compact. House leaders and Republicans backed swift passage, but the governor suggested she won't force the issue if Senate Democrats refuse. The state's application for federal funding is due on November 5th, highlighting pressure on lawmakers to act quickly. Dozens of residents packed a meeting this week to debate the future of the 236-acre fairgrounds that host the New Mexico State Fair. The state has hired Stantec Counseling to draft a master plan funded by an $850,000 contract with recommendations due by February of 2026. Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham wants to redevelop the site with mixed-use projects, including affordable housing, parks, retail, and possibly a new arena, backed by $12 million in state funds. Some residents welcome the idea as a chance to uplift Albuquerque's International District, while others voice fears of gentrification, displacement, crime, and wasted taxpayer money. Speakers raised concern about losing the fair's historic home, straining already overburdened police resources, and ignoring deeper neighborhood issues like poverty, drugs, and homelessness. Still, supporters argue redevelopment could bring green space, commerce, and long-term opportunities. The meeting was the first of 3 public input sessions, with the next scheduled for late October or early November. The debate highlighted the central tension, whether to preserve tradition or embrace redevelopment as a path to renewal. And a public land meeting in Las Cruces this week focused on a proposed land swap between the New Mexico State Land Office and the Bureau of Land Management that would shift about 85,000 acres inside the Oregon Mountain Desert Peaks National Monument to federal control. The goal is to preserve state-owned parcels within the monument and give the BLM clearer management authority, while the state would receive lands of similar value near the Las Cruces and Santa Teresa industrial parks that could generate lease revenue for schools and universities. Officials stress that that the exchange could take years, requiring environmental review, tribal consultation, and public input. The land office has raised $12.5 billion for education since 2019 and sees industrial lands as more productive for the trust than parcels in the monument. The meeting also drew questions about a separate early-stage discussion involving a possible land trade with the Mescalero Apache tribe for 400 acres near the Sonoma Ranch in Las Cruces. According to county records, potential uses once floated included an amphitheater, racetrack, or casino, though officials say the tribe may be rethinking the proposal. This is the first of 4 public meetings, with others scheduled in Lordsburg, Deming, and Silver City. An interactive map of the proposed parcels is available at nmstatelands.org. The Leading News is powered by the journalism of the Albuquerque Journal. If you enjoy hearing all of the stories we share with you here daily, please consider becoming a digital subscriber to the Journal by utilizing the discount code in our show notes. Every subscription helps support local journalism and allows us to provide you with the news that matters to you. Now taking a look at Albuquerque's weather forecast. Today you can expect sunny skies with a high near 81, and as for this evening, mostly clear with a low around 53. To keep up with all the latest news from the Albuquerque Journal, you can visit our website at abqjournal.com. That's the Leading News. I'm Gino Gutierrez. We'll be back tomorrow.